Can you believe that we're coming into the 8th season?
No.
In season 7's intro, we talked about the fact that we are Trinitarian, that we're Calvinists, and that we believe that everyone is saved the same way. Abraham was saved the same way that I'm saved and you're saved. What other core issues do we stand by?
That, yeah, all the solas. Because we recognize those as core hermeneutical principles. They're like signposts in the road.
You and I are both Sabbatarians. We both keep a kosher diet, and we celebrate the biblical festivals. People have said that we're part of the Hebrew roots movement. Other people have said we're part of the Messianic movement. I see that the idea of practice being different in all sorts of denominations, which is why I consider myself a non-denominational Christian.
If there's, it's worthwhile if there's even a single person out there that hears a discussion and, you know, through our discussion, the Holy Spirit like quickens that person's heart on a specific topic, maybe helps them in a way that they've been wrestling with the word and trying to understand.
We have faith in Yeshua. We have faith in Jesus Christ. We're saved by faith alone, justified by faith alone. There's no work will save me.
I think we're gospel roots. We're gospel roots. In other words, we go back to the core promise of the gospel in the scriptures, and exemplified, like Paul says, in the promise, in your seed all the nations of the world will be blessed.
Here we go! It is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. This is Messiah Matters number 331. Rise and shine, campers, and don't forget your booties because it's cold out there today. My name is Caleb Hay.
I sure as heck fire remember you. I'm Rob Van.
Right.
I was like, well, what am I going to say to that?
Happy belated.
Bada bing, bing.
Happy belated Groundhog's Day. You know, I think that you're actually clipping. Can you bring your sound down a hair?
How's that? Test.
Yeah, that's better. I'll turn you up over here on this end.
Bing.
Yeah, so happy belated Groundhog's Day. Groundhog Day.
Am I right?
Am I right or am I right?
Right.
Am I right. Dude, I've seen that movie so many times. It's unbelievable. Well,
I sure as heck fire remember you.
We already got people commenting in the chat room with questions.
But heck fire, what is there really a heck fire? That's the big question.
You know, I got to say, I sat down with Chris Date yesterday. Wonderful guy. Honestly, we have so much in common. It's unbelievable. One thing we do not have in common is our interpretation of eternal punishment of the wicked. And that's okay. That is okay. Oops.
I'm all right with that.
I'm all right with that. And actually, you know, Chris was he's more well learned. That's not the proper way to say anything. Chris is much more educated than I am. And so I think if I tried to have any kind of a formal debate with him, even, oh, you know what? Hang on just a second. Oh, look at this. Why do I look so dull? I'll tell you why. That's what happens when you forget to turn your lights on. if I tried to have any kind of a conversation with him on the topic, I would probably lose hands down, just because he's spent so much more time in the realm of the the debate of eternal punishment of the wicked. So I'm fine with that. I don't need to win all the arguments. With that said, I think that there is I find major flaws. Major flaws. And not even with Chris's argument, I'm just talking about the idea of annihilationism in general. I think that the arguments are silly. I do. I think that they're silly. I think that the idea that not existing is eternal torment. I think that actually, I think that that's trying to I think it's trying to
tell him. You should tell him.
I should tell him.
Or just tell him. You don't have to be specific, but a procedure.
I think that it's trying to Rob's laughing because he knows where I'm going with this. Okay, it's because I gave Rob an analogy before this, but okay, trying to say that eternal torment is you can be unconscious for that is remaking words and definitions. You're trying to relabel something. And let me give you an example for everyone out there. And ladies, you might not get this as much as men. Younger men, probably not as much as older men. For older guys who have gone in for a checkup recently, you've probably been told by the doctor that you have to have a colonoscopy. This is a very uncomfortable, embarrassing, and it's not a fun procedure. Basically, what they do is they take a camera and they stick it in places that no man wants anything stuck. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about and to think about. And let me tell you something. I had to go through one of these. And I went in, and the doctor put me out of my misery. How did he do that? He made me unconscious for the whole thing. You fall asleep, and all of a sudden you wake up, and everything's good. I was not tormented by that doctor and his little probe. Now, I would have been if I was awake for it, if I was conscious for it. So the idea that torment means you can be unconscious for it, no, I'm sorry. I wasn't tormented by the doctor, and you're not tormented if you're unconscious for something. That's not torment. So when it says eternal torment, to say that you're unconscious for that is ridiculous. It's trying to redefine words. Now, I don't know, I'm sure that my new friend Chris Date would have
Ned Ryerson.
Bing would have some.
Hey, good job on that Bing, by the way. How did you do that?
I've seen the movie enough.
Do it again.
Bing. Anyway,
the first one was better.
The first one was better.
You nailed it, man.
Thank you.
You nailed it.
Okay. Anyway, that's my analogy. And I think that. I think that the idea that you're just unconscious for something and that can be torment is going to surgery sometime. It's not torment until you wake up and it hurts, right? All right. Give us a call if you disagree with us on anything, including eternal torment of the wicked. You can give us a call. Call our comment line. It's just a recording. You won't talk to us. And you can tell us how wrong we are, 253-465-3205. Or you can call and tell us how right we are and how torment has to be conscious. You have to be conscious for torment. So 253-465-3205. You can also shoot us an email, chag@TorahResource.com, chag@TorahResource.com. And then also, we actually have things on hell. I think there is 2 articles. I don't think we have anything on annihilationism, but there is 2 articles on TorahResource.com written by my father, Tim Hegg. You can go to TorahResource.com, and I think one of his better articles on the idea of hell is, did Yeshua descend into hell when he was crucified? My father says no. Go find out why. You can find that in our articles section. All of the articles are free on TorahResource.com. We also have paid things and a bunch of other things. Anyway, that reminds me, happy belated Groundhog's Day. Yes, and to everyone in the chat room. And finally, last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I know everyone now on every video tells you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, but you should subscribe to ours because we're great. That's why, because we reference Groundhog's Day. I always put an S on the end of it. My wife always corrects me. It's not Groundhog's Day. It's Groundhog Day. Mea culpa. right? Anyway,
Okay, but when he lives it over and over again, is it Groundhog's Day or Groundhog Days?
oh, see, now we're getting into the hermeneutical disputes of Groundhog Day. Rod wants to know what movie that's from. Come on, Rod. It's from the movie Groundhog Day with Bill
Written
Murray.
by Harold Ramis, who is the doctor. Did you know that?
Yeah,
When he goes in and the doctor can't see very well.
Well, I don't see. Yeah,
I think he wrote it,
dude. If you haven't seen that movie, no, actually, I'm
Go see
sorry,
it.
Hackett's. Obviously, you don't know the movie well enough to know the key lines from the movie, which means you have not seen it nearly enough times. I want you to go watch it, then watch it again and again and again and again.
Oh boy!
All right. Shall we jump in?
Yeah, I thought that was the show.
That's it. Have a good day, guys. Well, before we jump into topics, this is something that we don't do very often, and I think we should do it more often. I don't know what you're currently studying. I don't know what you're currently reading, and I don't know what's blown your mind in the past couple of weeks. What's going on, man?
Oh, cool. Well, thank you, Caleb. Had I known, I would have brought all the books that are burdening up my kitchen table.
Jenny's happy about that, I'm sure.
Not at all. Here's the thing. I got nice natural light up there.
Yeah.
And there's something about that, Okay. Wow, where to start?
I get to go next. So
one book I'm reading is from 2007, is Israeli scholar named Yonatan Ben Dov.
Oh yeah.
And he's a Dead Sea Scrolls expert, and he
I know
wrote
the name well.
a book on what's called The Head of All Years. And he explains that the Aramaic texts from Qumran, some of which are dealing with the stars and calendar issues, and some of which made it into what we call Enoch today. He shows that it's part of a Jewish response to Mesopotamian science from the Persian into the Hellenistic era while it was being transmitted over to Europe from Mesopotamia. So you have the idea of calendars, watching the stars, and tables of the heavens and things like that adopted but modified in a group of Jewish scribes that wrote in Aramaic, and they might have been priestly because they refer to themselves as priests. But they modify things. So basically, one of the arguments he makes is that one of these texts from Qumran could be viewed as a translation, an Aramaic translation from an Akkadian text, from a Babylonian text. And what this sect of Jews did is to try to take from that Mesopotamian or Babylonian tradition and modify it and make it kind of Jewish. And ultimately, though, it becomes part of the Book of Enoch and has new meanings tied to it. But one of the key things is it's a 364-day calendar. Anyway, so there's a lot on that. Another book I'm reading right now, which is really good, is by Eli Yassif. Another book, it was written in Hebrew, but is translated into English, The Legends of Safed. It's called Life and Fantasy in the City of Kabbalah. So it's, I've been to Safed a few times. It's in Galilee. It's where Isaac Luria and, Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, all these guys, and they were into some weird stuff. Let me tell you, they were into weird stuff, reincarnation being one of them. Speaking about the issue of hell, some of which I think is a response to Dante's Inferno, where there was a real clear, epic description of the layers of hell and purgatory, and this idea of reincarnation in the Jewish world comes in that wake. But as a core differentiator for one. But anyway, this book is done not by a religious scholar, not by a Jewish mystic, but by one of Israel's preeminent folklorists. So he comes from the perspective of folklore. And It is a great read. Boy, it is a real good read. And he does it. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, those are two books that I'm reading right now. But anyway,
I mean, you and I have totally. It's amazing the different ends of the spectrum that you and I are on right now. Because I'm currently reading. Well, I got a lot of things that I'm reading. I'm reading a lot in terms of foundational church doctrine, and the reason why is not doctrine, but gospel-centered churches and what makes a gospel-centered church, why expository preaching is so necessary. This is all kind of preparing for my lectures and also my study in the book of Colossians that I plan on doing here in the next, into April. So that's all for that. But then I'm also reading, John Owen, and I'm reading Jonathan Edwards. And that is really, everyone says that Jonathan Edwards is like the greatest, and I can see that he might be sometime soon. However, John Owen right now is definitely hitting on all cylinders for me. I mean, everything he says, I want to underline. I just want to underline.
What is so cool about this? I've spent time with both those authors also. What is so cool is it's their words. You're reading because it's the same language, right? They're using English, and they use English in a way that shames my use of English. Like the way these guys communicate,
unbelievable.
It is with force and elegance and clarity. But they're using, it's like, wow. Like so, these guys had some serious.
So I'm actually reading for fun. I'm reading the original Moby Dick, and I've been reading it for quite some time. It's a 400.
Call me Ishmael.
Yeah, it's a 450-page book, if you don't know, and some of it is like you can't put the book down. It's a page turner, and then he gets into things like he has like, I don't know how many pages, 10 pages on the Almanac of Wales. And it's just the biggest snoozer I've ever, if you want to go to sleep, parts of Moby Dick will put you to sleep. But the thing is that the language used in Moby Dick is, he's writing mid-1800s. Jonathan Edwards is writing late 1700s. So it's closer to that language, much closer than I am in terms of modern day, And so I feel like my entire vocabulary is expanding at rapid rates. With all of that said,
very cool.
One of the things that has blown my mind recently is looking at is trying to consider what the first century believers, what they considered, and this comes from all of the study that I've been doing. But considering the idea that I want to move my congregation to be, and I think it is, but to be what is considered a gospel-centered church. One of the authors that I'm reading right now, he said, if you think that, and he's speaking to pastors predominantly at this point, but he says, if you think that the gospel is only going to fill maybe 3 or 4 weeks of messages, then you have not understood the gospel. You haven't understood the depths of the gospel. The gospel is found on every page of Scripture. It's found in every concept. Not every word or line is about the gospel, but it will all get you back to the gospel, all these kind of things. And so then my question to the community that I was preaching at the last week was, what do you think the gospel is? We talk about the gospel constantly, so what is the gospel? And this brings up all sorts of interesting insights when you start to let people tell you what the gospel is. It brings all sorts of insights into how effective your teaching has actually been. And then this brought me to the idea of, what did the first century believers, what did Peter, Paul, what did Timothy believe the gospel was? How did they talk about the gospel? And so I have recentered my understanding of the first century idea of the gospel to understand exactly what Paul calls it in Galatians 3. In your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And if you reorient your mind that the gospel message was a total reshaping and radical re-understanding of the Abrahamic covenant, then all of a sudden the shift may be subtle, but it's been kind of a mind-blowing shift for me in my theological understanding. I'm getting like Morse code in my headphones. Are you hearing that?
Is it that?
No, it is not.
No, that's me clicking. I was moving my screen around.
Nope, that wasn't you. It's not you.
Okay.
It's still going. I can hear the pitch.
Can you decode what it is?
I cannot. I don't know Morse code.
Do you have your decoder ring?
My decoder
No, yeah,
ring.
that's a really good point. Is that Yeshua came to teach and clarify, right? It says at the end of Romans that he came to deliver the promises made to the fathers.
Right.
Right. So any other interpretation of the Abrahamic covenant was wrong. No matter how much currency, no matter how much sway or influence it had in the midst of this or that Jewish sect, they all had to go. They all had to adopt Yeshua's, which is the only interpretation, is what it really is. But Jews had gone astray, and so it feels like a radical, the reinterpretation. It's not real. It feels that way from the perspective of the sectarians that, like Saul of Tarsus, that have their own concluded agenda, and that they're all invested in it. And Paul had his little slap on the.
Now every time I hear the word promise in the apostolic scriptures, and every time I hear gospel, I think of the Abrahamic covenant. And maybe that's wrong in some places, but I think that predominantly that is a.
Well, let me ask you this: where else are you going to get a blessing in this world from God?
Right.
God didn't create other blessings. Like it's not like we can walk around in this world and see all these different opportunities for a blessing, and you just pick which one you want. No, he blessed Abraham and said, "In your seed,
right,
those who bless you, I will bless."
Yep.
Well, first he said, "I will bless you."
Yeah. Okay. Let's move.
Good stuff.
Let's move on. We don't do that very often. We don't talk about the things that we're studying too often. But
the other thing, if I may, I'm wrapping up, feeling the heat. I've got a publication deadline for this SBL Midrash thing that's going to come out in the fall, which I'm really excited about. It is based off a paper I gave in San Diego, which was over a year ago, because it was the last live SBL. But also I have a bunch of ideas for proposals for papers this coming fall in San Antonio. And the president of TorahResource has informed us that we are going. I think Caleb said, because we'd already had some plane miles or whatever for that, which is I'm really grateful for. So, and I think the deadline's in March to get some ideas. So I have a lot of ideas for different sections. And, but, I'm such a high connectivity person. It's more difficult for me to put things into a linear.
Okay. I got to here because you know what? I'm in a place where I feel like and I've said this multiple times, but I feel like I'm stuck in mud. And the reason why is because I got so many things that are in the works. So for instance, I've finished writing my Acts commentary. It's done. But now I'm going back through it and I'm editing and I'm having proofreaders proofread through it. So I'm 6 months out at least on my Acts commentary. In the meantime, I am preparing my notes on Colossians. So the notes on Colossians will probably be published before my Acts commentary is, even though my Acts commentary is written. It is very frustrating because I want it out. I want it out so that it's not because I want people to buy it, mind you, which if you want to buy it, that's great. But the reason I want it out is because I want it off my desk. I don't want to have to deal with it anymore. And I know that sounds weird, but do you know, like, when you finish a project and you're like, I'm done with it, but then you have to keep coming back to that project. It's like, this is out of sight, out of mind now, in my kind of a thing. It's frustrating. Okay, let's.
So what are you excited about in your Acts commentary?
I'm excited to get it published so that I don't have to work on it anymore.
No, but I mean, what are you excited about what you did in it?
Yeah, I think
what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think that ultimately most people are going to be most excited about Acts 15, Acts 10, my treatment of Peter's vision and stuff like that. I was probably the most excited to learn about the things that are freshest in my mind. The shipwreck, Paul's shipwreck in 27 into 28. Learning about the uprisings in the first century and prior to the first century that are referenced in the book of Acts was super interesting to me. And so one of the things that I try to do is, unlike my father goes through his commentaries one verse at a time. It's a verse by verse treatment. I take a chunk at a time. So I do, verses 1 through 11, and then I'll write on that. And so I think it's more for the average person. I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed because I used traditional church language. So I used church instead of ecclesia. I used Jesus instead of Yeshua. I used Christ instead of Messiah. And I did that because I feel like a lot of the people that I'm trying to actually reach with the commentary are people who are either in the church but questioning things like the Sabbath, or are maybe, I don't want to use the term coming out of the church because I don't believe that's right, but maybe have come to an understanding that the Sabbath should be kept, and now they're looking for a group that is Sabbatarian. Those kind of people are kind of the people that I'm writing to. At the end of every chapter, I also put study questions and then preaching points. So my hope is for the lay pastor who doesn't have a whole lot of training, they can pick up my commentary and get some points and then have a couple of things to preach on a Sunday or on a Saturday.
Awesome. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
On the fly interview with Caleb Haig concerning his forthcoming commentary on the book of Acts, available in 6 months or so.
Yeah, who knows? All right, we still haven't got, we're in almost a half an hour and we haven't really talked about anything.
That's okay, we're having fun.
We're having fun. Okay, Ned writes in, and Ned's are good for
Not Ryerson.
Not Ryerson, by the way. And did my mea culpa again to our producers. Here are our producers, everyone, producing show 331. Thank you very much to our producers and to all of our supporters nonetheless. So Ned writes in. What does Ned say? Ned says this. He says, "Hi, Rob. Yesterday, someone in the Torah study mentioned the phrase, the third day." Now, this is actually one of the places that I will kind of light up because I've done work on the third day. Anyway, I have often wondered the meaning of the third day and how it relates to the seventh day, the millennium. I know the Hosea passage says, after 2 days, he will revive us. And the third day, he will raise us up to live in his sight. I think there are a few others in the Torah. Thanks. Okay, so the question is obviously on the third day. Do you want to start?
No, you've probably done more research than I have on it. Let's hear it.
So in the ancient Near East, the idea of third day, if someone was dead, they weren't considered there. It was believed that their soul stayed with them until the third day. And when the third day came, their soul left, and then basically their body was like, that's when you would dispose of the body. And so this is actually very important for our understanding of the resurrection. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, the sign of Jonah and whatnot, and this gets into all different kinds of different debates, but it didn't have to be 24-hour days. Any part of a day was considered a day. And
what source is this?
What source is what?
Where do we learn? I remember someone told me that before, and I asked them what, like the statement, oh, people believed that. How do we know people believed that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's I've never seen it. I think it's in the Talmud.
It is in the Talmud. And so we're talking later sources. And actually, this is actually the earliest source that you have for someone. And I think there's more actually on the third day. And we see the third day in terms of death throughout the scriptures as well. So it's not specifically said, but I think that there's evidence that points to it. In terms of the idea that not a full 24-hour day constituted a day, we find that in the rabbinical literature. And so once again, we're late in that, but the idea is that it's still held over. And so this is why, you'll say, oh, well, Yeshua died on a Friday. And, those in the Hebrew roots movement will say, oh, no, he died on a Wednesday. Haven't you seen the 119 image? No, this is not true. Yeshua clearly died on a Friday. It's in the text. I mean, I know every time I say that, people, oh, no, it's not in the text. It is in the text. Anyway, the idea is that Yeshua died on a Friday. That constitutes one day being dead. Saturday is the next day being dead, and Sunday, any portion of Sunday, would be the third day. And so it says, we expected him to rise on the third day, and it is the third day, and he has not risen. This is on the road to Emmaus, right? And it is the third day. And so obviously they didn't think it had to be 72 hours, all sorts of stuff. Like this. And we see throughout Scripture on the third day, by the third day, all these kind of things. So, but as it relates to the millennium, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is, I don't know for sure because Ned didn't say in his email, but my assumption is that he was alluding to also in the Talmud, this idea that creates a timeline for the world in units of 1,000 years, and that each 1,000 years is a day.
Right.
And so,
I lost Rob. Where'd Rob go?
Testing.
There
1,
we go.
2.
There you are. Okay, you're back.
So I don't know where you lost me. So
1,000 years is a day.
Yeah. So if Christ was incarnated 2,000 years ago, that's 2 days ago.
Right.
And so we're coming into the third millennium, which is the seventh millennium, which is what Michael, what's his name, that you saw in Jerusalem, that was his whole shtick.
Right.
Was that the seventh millennium? I think that was his website, was seventhmillennium.com or whatever. Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, I can't comment on what rabbis believed other than what was written down. And I know that there's different views of the world. If you look at it like, well, we're in what year we're in, 5,000 something, 81. You could say, oh, so once the Jewish calendar gets to 6,000, it'll be the Messianic era, because from 6,001 to 7,000 will be 1,000-year reign. That's the viewpoint some people take. I don't know. I mean, I guess we can speculate about it for a couple minutes, but I don't know how to hang out there. I mean, I don't know. What do we do with that?
Yeah. It's a good question.
But I might be not getting all the what Ned was trying to ask. I acknowledge that too.
We have a question in the chat room that I want to pose to you. I have not heard of this, so I'll ask you if you've heard about it. They say, have you had the opportunity to read through Brad H. Young, New Testament Authentic Hebrew Heritage Bible? If so, what do you think? I have not heard of such a translation. Anytime I hear things like authentic before a translation, and anytime a single person's name is put on a translation, I always have huge, huge red flags go up. But that doesn't mean that I don't know who this Brad Young is. And so,
is he at Oral Roberts University? Is that the guy who's at?
He lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Young is an emeritus professor at the Faculty of Graduate School of Theology at Oral Roberts University, where he served as the tenured professor of Judaic Christian Studies, teaching Bible and theology for 31 years. So
Yeah,
I haven't heard of it. Every time somebody asks me about Bible translations, I go back to the same thing. Find a Bible translation that is done by a committee of people. Something like
exactly
ESV,
NASB,
yeah,
NET, yeah.
No
need to.
The NET is good for the notes, but I actually I the more I read the NET, the more I realize they have some major. They're going off of what they think the text means and not what the text says, and that
they all
problems.
do though. They all do at certain degrees.
No, but what I mean is that the NET is not a literal translation. It's so in other words, like my father pointed out, like, who may ascend into the hill of the Lord? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to falsehood and not sworn deceitfully. If you read that, they don't take a literal translation of that at all. They tell you what they think it means. And they do that throughout the text. But their 66,000 notes are a invaluable resource. It's unbelievable. Their notes are fantastic. Yeah. Stick to the NASB, the ESV. That's my suggestion. And why we would need another translation outside of,
another Hebraic.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Caleb said that a person called Lou White posted on one of our YouTube channels or YouTube videos, but we saved it. But we deleted it because it has a bunch of crazy stuff on it. But it's like, I'm glad Caleb kept it. He sent it to me. I emailed Lou White. I said, look here with an image. I CC'd Caleb. I said, here's the post. I said, are you serious about this question? Do you seriously want an answer, or are you already,
Yeah, have you made up your mind?
You made up your mind, and this, and I said in the email, I said, I'm hesitant to. I'm asking you. I'm putting the ball in your court. If you really want to learn something, let me know. I haven't heard back. So now, he didn't get the email.
Right.
Possible. But on the other hand, he did come across our video and take the time to comment a paragraph, a pretty healthy size comment. So if you're watching this, Mr. White, contact me if you really would like to learn about the name of God rather than go with the false presuppositions that you have. And I'd be happy to walk you through that.
Paul writes in, he says, how do we truly know which way to, and this is, by the way, this is on a video that I clipped regarding paganism in words. So last show, 3:30, we talked about whether or not words, pagan words. So for instance, Saturday. Oh, that comes from Saturn. Don't say Saturday. Those kind of things. And ultimately, this comes down to word policing, right? Whether or not word policing is something that we should do. Now, this person's, Paul's comment, we can take and actually expand it a little bit. So, but I think it's worthy of a discussion. He writes in, he says, how do you or we truly know which way to look when the same word policing gets us off into total misunderstandings of scriptures? If you close one eye to what or how people say Lord, Hades, Saturday, Jesus, etc., then turn around and admonish people to have both eyes open, because that scripture doesn't say, go get an Easter ham for Sunday. No, wait, Sabbath is any day you want it. The instructions are done away with. I can sin by grace. I mean, saved by grace. I may be too literal, but earnestly trying to discern what is true and proper. There are a lot of passionate people out there teaching opposing things from the same scriptures.
Well, I need you to translate that to me, because I appreciate the email, but I want to make sure I'm catching the nuance.
I think that what he's saying, and I'm going to actually put it in my own words in a few seconds. I think what he's saying is, okay, you say that words aren't pagan like Jesus, Saturday, Hades, Lord. Okay, but if there are pagan origins to them, then Why is that okay? Why doesn't that lead into like, I'm free to be able to use these words? Well, I'm free to eat whatever I want. I'm free to worship on Sunday instead of Saturday. In other words, doesn't this
like offense against transgression?
Yeah. So you don't seem to care about using paganism within words. What makes you not care about using paganism in other things?
Thank you. Okay.
Now what?
I think I get it.
Now what I would like to expand this into is, okay, and this is a question that we both can answer, but if you're willing to say Lord, Hades, Saturday, Jesus, these things, and people think that they have pagan origins, which, by the way, I do not believe that Jesus has pagan origins or Lord has pagan origins or any of that kind of stuff. But anyway, nonetheless, words like Saturday and Hades and these things. So if we're willing to use those words anyway, then why not allow someone to say something like Yahweh for the sacred name when they're, reading at our congregation?
Oh, okay.
That's kind of where I took his comment and expanded it into almost a sacred name-ism of.
In other words, the question could be this: Caleb, I see you being word police on this front, but on this front over here,
right,
or being against word policing on this front, but on this front over here, it's like you're the front of the line of the word police.
Exactly.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay,
yes, exactly.
Okay.
You want to go first? Because just some guy actually goes into sacred nameism after this. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a real, if that is the question, if that's the core question is, look, you guys are anti-word police here, but over here you are pro-word police. Well, we are pro-police on the right things, lawful.
Right.
We want lawful policing. Lawful policing. That means clarification and explanation and sound teaching of what Scripture says. That is something we are to guard and to protect, is what the Scriptures say. So when it comes to, on the one hand, how come then, I'll just do whatever I want. I'll eat pig whenever I feel like it. I like bacon, Well, that doesn't stand up because that's against what the Torah says. So that kind of policing is well, maybe I don't even know if that's policing. That's just saying, hey, this is what the Scriptures teach. When Yeshua confronted the Pharisees that we read about in Matthew 15 or Mark 7 about the hand washing, they had elevated a local cultural custom by which they differentiated their group from other Jews and from Gentiles. They had made that, they had given it greater weight than the Scriptures. And Yeshua called them out on it. And so is that policing? Was Yeshua policing them when he called them out on that? But on the flip side, the Pharisees, when they are saying, hey, your disciples aren't washing their hands when they come in here, that's their policing, and that's the wrong kind of policing. So that's where I see it. When it comes to the sacred name, people are inventing, again, it has to do with low literacy, low Bible literacy. And that's my opinion, and it's a somewhat educated opinion. I don't have all knowledge, but I'll tell you what, I mean, it's for the people that are coming up with these like Yahusha and Yahuwah and Yehovah and all these things, these people are being led down the wrong path. They're being led down the wrong path. They're being equipped for a battle that's never going to happen. And what's happening, it's to their own disadvantage in the long run, because to stand strong on the rock of the Word of God, to build on the words of what Yeshua says, whoever hears my words and does them is like a wise man who builds on the rock. If that's where you want to be, then you need to abandon that kind of foolishness of these people that are sensationalizing how to say the name of God and all this stuff that Yeshua and the disciples had nothing. They would have laughed. They would have laughed at that idea. So that's what I have to say about why.
Okay, so we actually have several things going on here. Number one is, in terms of word policing, I think that the idea of word policing things like Hades, like Saturday, January, all these kind of things, I think that this comes from actually the idea that we're not supposed to, the Torah tells us not to have the names of pagan deities on our lips, okay? And I think that this actually is a misunderstanding of what that means. What people think by that is that we're not even allowed to say these names, and therefore this goes into words, and now we're going to word police all these different things because, look, these words come from pagan deities. So I think that that's kind of where this comes from. However, if you've heard me talk about the Semitic understanding of a name before, and actually Chris Dayton and I talked about this yesterday at lunch, but the idea of a Semitic name is not the title of a god. It's not that I can't say the word Baal, or that I can't say, I don't know what, Muhammad, or, I know that Muhammad's a prophet, but, anyway, it's not that you can't say these things because having a title on your lips is against Torah. The idea is that you are actually putting a something behind it. In other words, you're praying to, or you're in the name of a deity, and what that means is to be a representative, to come in the power of, to put trust in, and to ultimately, if you're praying to a deity, if you're praying in the name of a deity, you are ultimately falling into idolatry. This is clearly against Torah. So the idea that you're not allowed to have the name of a pagan deity on your lips is to talk about worship of another god. It doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to say the word January, okay? So that's number one on policing, word policing. Now, I think that to talk about the sacred name and things like that, let's go to just some guy, and we've talked about just some guy in his comments before, usually has really good comments, and he has another one here. He says, question, I am totally on board with the concept of Yeshua and Jesus as language progression, and fine with saying the Lord or Jehovah or Yahweh. But is it better to make a best attempt at using the name of God, or is it better to refuse to make an attempt at all? Is the dominant theory that perhaps hiding the use of the name, insert your best guess here, with just saying the Lord or Hashem, which for those who don't know means the name, is better, and we wait till we have a clear answer from God, like the woman at the well? When the Messiah comes, he will tell us, till then, I ain't changing. That's not an exact reflection of the Greek. Or is the answer simply go with your community? This is a great question because I think that this is
if you're part of Yeshua's ecclesia, then you go with the community, and the community is it's Kurios, it's Mar, it's Adonai. That's your community. Your community is the community of the apostolic writings. And if you go with that community, then there's no precedent for anybody to come up with inventive ideas based on limited, minute understanding of all the issues involved, and normally zero or minuscule knowledge of the languages involved, and the inability just to hear Yeshua himself and the disciples and say, I'm part of that group. And if I'm part of that group, there's no support for these Indiana Jones adventures on discovering the hidden name of God and all the stuff that, Gordon sells and all this kind of stuff. It's not there.
So there's a lot of different things that we could say about this. Recently in my community, somebody said, hey man, why don't we say Yahweh? Let's just say Yahweh.
That one's an invention of the scholars. It's not even believers that came up with that one. It's not even believers. It's 19th century academics.
But what I figure, I agree with you. But to sit down and to try to educate people on this is going to be a waste of time. And the reason why is because people have filled their heads with all sorts of internet scholarship, quote unquote. I'm putting quote marks around internet scholarship, which is nonsense. And you know what?
Oh, but you see, wasn't it the John? What's the John MacArthur Bible? Aren't they putting Yahweh in the? And it was this big feature. It's like, come on, you guys. It's.
The point that I made to this gentleman was, look, it's a point. It is a point of if we were to start saying Yahweh from the pulpit, there would be a split in the community. So there would be people that would say that's not how it's said. And here's my thing.
And they would know how.
Well, probably they wouldn't. They would just say you shouldn't be trying. But the point, neither here nor there. It's obviously a divisive issue among believers. That's number one. Number two, God gives us a slew of his names. El Shaddai, Yah, El. The list goes on and on and on. Why are people so stuck on Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh? In the apostolic scriptures, and this is one thing that Rob said to me the other day, we do not see Yeshua or the apostles or the disciples trying to say the sacred name. They don't try to transliterate the sacred name. They don't try to say the sacred name. What do they use? They use God. They use, Kurios. They use Lord. So Lord, God, Elohim. Right?
Heaven. Yeshua says, or on power, that you just see the Son at the right hand of power. It's just yeah. And on the flip side, what we do see from archaeological evidence is even pagans writing the four-letter name of God on different amulets with the names of other deities in the context of magic to try to influence under the belief that because they have this, quote, secret information, secret knowledge, that they now have power.
Right.
And this is it's totally wrong.
That's idolatry. That's idolatry.
And why? In our community, we're reading on the 1 year cycle, and we're reading in Exodus. And in this, we had this great discussion about Exodus during the plagues. He said that he will cause all of Egypt to know his name. Well, all of Egypt will know his name. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything other than that that Israel is his people, and that he's going to shame that he's the true God, that he's going to shame Egyptian theology, and that he's faithful to his covenant.
And this comes back to the idea that when the Semitic understanding, especially in the Bible, and this can be shown over and over and over again, is not a title. His name is who he is. If you believe that he is the only God, I am. If you believe that he is I am, then this is what it means to be in the name of Christ, right. To be in the name of God. It's not to have the correct pronunciation of a name. Now, people are going to say, well, you're word policing. Okay, well, once again, we're talking about huge divisive issues here. Let's go back to the scriptures.
No, we're talking about invention.
Yeah, we are talking about invention.
These. That's why we see so many different ways that people are saying that you need to say it, but then they don't agree on how to say it. Why? Because they're all trying to argue for their own invention. They're all trying to sell their own invention. It's not. There's no foundation.
Let's go to the scriptures. If Yeshua didn't try to, we don't have one example, not one example of Yeshua attempting to insert the sacred name of God, or at least the writers trying to recount him saying the sacred name of God.
The only place we have like in Revelation where it has the Hebrew word hallelujah transliterated. Hallelujah. And it's just, right. And yeah,
exactly. But the point is that if Yeshua is not, and the apostles are not trying to push their own way of pronouncing a name, why are we trying to outdo our master?
Slave is not above his master.
Exactly.
Student is not above his teacher. That's Yeshua said. So back to the idea, is it our community thing? Well, yeah, what community? If you're the community of Yeshua and the apostles, then go with that community. If you are Indiana Jones wanting to come up with a new religion and the authentic Hebraic church with Paleo Hebrew and all this stuff, then that's a house built on sand. And that's what Lou White has done with his translation, Big Bible that he's got out. You know,
I agree.
you're leading people down the wrong way. It's the wrong path.
Let's go to a totally different conversation. This is from Gregory, and this is an interesting one because, well, I think it's a fairly anyway. I know that this question is not a typical theological question you and Rob answer on your show, but I had a practical question regarding the use of swine in an agricultural setting. I know that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh created all creatures with a purpose in mind, and that animals and the creation were created in light of the creation mandate for dominion. And he gives references. Furthermore, Leviticus 11:7 through 8 indicates that swine is unclean to eat and not to be touched and not to touch their carcasses. Okay, right here we're already moving off the text a little bit. Leviticus 11:7 through 8 is actually talking about all unclean animals. It's not just talking about swine. And if you read the context of Leviticus 11:7 through 8, it's talking about all unclean animals. He gives examples. He says it has to have a split hoof and chew the cud, right? And then he gives examples of what is not acceptable. In other words, if it chews the cud, he gives examples. If it chews the cud but it doesn't split the hoof, you're not allowed to eat it. If it splits the hoof but it doesn't chew the cud, you're not allowed to eat it. It has to do both. And he gives examples of those. One of those examples is the pig. But the text of Leviticus 11:7 through 8 is not singling out pork as more wrong than any other unclean animal. So that's number one. So Leviticus 11:7 through 8 indicates that swine is unclean to eat and not to touch their carcass. And that's for any unclean animal, which I take carcass to mean dead bodies, remains, bones.
Yeah, but even if there's a cow that died, that if there's a cow carcass and you touch it, you're unclean. You're not less unclean,
right,
from a cow carcass than you are from a pig carcass.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree with you.
You're not supposed to eat. You're not supposed to eat if it's a clean animal. Like if a cow dies is torn by wild beasts,
you're not allowed to eat it.
Or hit by a car.
You're right. Yeah.
Like a deer's hit by a car and people go and there's some good
I'm
meat
sorry,
here.
all you people down in the Ozarks, your roadkill is not.
Torah says kosher. In that case, the roadkill, whether it's a deer or a cow or an aardvark.
Did I just offend half of our listening audience? I'm sorry, people in the Ozarks.
Or a what else gets hit by a car? A squirrel.
Yeah, that's unkosher anyway.
Yeah. My point is, it doesn't matter if it's a cow that killed by a car or a squirrel killed by the car. You don't eat the meat in either case, according to the Torah.
Right. So they go on, and actually, let's get to the text here because I want to see it. Oh, come on! What's happening? That should have worked. Why didn't that work? There it goes. Okay. They say. But there, and this is where it gets really interesting, but there is a distinction between swine and the other unclean and clean animals. I don't think that's true. I think you're reading Leviticus 11 wrong. Anyway, they go on. Leviticus 11:24 through 27 seems to indicate that with other animals, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh commands that should one touch a carcass, they wash the clothes and be unclean until evening. This, of course, is way different than do not touch their carcass in Leviticus 11:7 through 8. No, I'm sorry. I think that this is a misinterpretation. 11:7 through 8 is talking about all unclean animals there. It reiterates in 11:24 through 27 that you're not allowed to touch the dead carcass of these animals. Once again, we're talking about death.
Well, it's not. It just says there are consequences for it.
Right.
I mean, sometimes you're going to have to. Like if there's a dead animal in your driveway, I mean, what are you going to do? Just drive around it? Like, no, you got to take care of business. You got to dispose of the carcass and what that looked like in ancient Israel. Did they burn it? Did they go bury it? I don't know what they did. Sometimes, according to the Torah, it would be possible to sell meat that died of it, some other thing. You could sell it to a person, a non-Israelite. But the idea is that would be those are people who are have no money and they're starving and they're not reckoned as part of the covenant people.
Right.
So In any event,
so getting back to the final point of this question. And the final point is, he says, my question, with all that being said, is there any evidence, historical or scriptural, that would indicate the using swine is allowed by Yod He Vav He? Yeah, all evidence would point that it is allowed, that you're allowed to use swine. You're just not allowed to eat it. And if you touch a dead carcass of it, you're going to be unclean until evening. Just like
here's an analogy I thought of is like my wife loves to garden in the springtime. As many probably right now, you're looking at your seed catalogs and planting your garden and everything, Lord willing, we have a beautiful spring on the way. Now those, our friends from the Southern hemisphere, of course, wouldn't be coming into winter, or fall, I guess, technically. But in any case, we have bugs that are like a good kind of bug. There's like good kind of spiders because they function. My wife knows way more about this. Caleb, maybe you know more. I don't know a lot about it, but I know that basically there's a little ecosystem of different kinds of bugs and bees and all this kind of stuff that you don't eat, but that God made, and they benefit the garden as a whole. And so what I eat, I take from the garden the tomatoes and the peppers and the kale and the lettuce and the onions and whatever, the zucchini, all the wonderful different kinds of produce. But the bugs, I'm not going through the garden picking out all the bugs and eating those. They're unclean for me. They're not for me to eat. That's the point.
Right.
They're not for me to eat. In the same way, now maybe there's people who have dealt with people who use swine for different reasons in part of their farm. And I'm sure there's a use. God didn't make them to not have a use. I don't know a lot about what that would look like or what that entails. I know what I've seen, pretty much eat anything. And there's mud, and that sort of thing. And I have to say, my wife and I have really liked watching these veteran shows where they have like Alaska Yukon vet doctor or whatever, and she goes out to all these different places. It's pretty awesome because you see all these different animals. But little baby piglets are super cute, and so I could see why little kids might want a little piglet for a pet. I can see that. But again, I'm speaking from ignorance on this in terms of how pigs are used and domesticated for people in situations where they're not for food. That's what I'm trying to say, is that I'm sure there are ways where it's not for food, but I don't know what they are.
So my biggest point here is that I think that there's multiple things going on in this comment. Number one, swine is not seen as dirtier or more different than other unclean animals. I don't see that in Leviticus 11. That's number one. Number two, yes, you can use a pig or anything else as long as you're not eating it. That's number two. There seems to be I'm not exactly sure what Gary in the chat room is getting at. He's talking about signs and wonders following the word preached. Torah should have signs and wonders following, correct. And then he goes to the disputed text of Mark 16 and quotes it for some reason. Gary, I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to get at here. And so what I would encourage you to do is the same thing I'd encourage everyone to do. If you have questions that you'd like us to look at, please go ahead and shoot us an email. You can write out all of your thoughts and describe your argument or your question or your comment in better detail. You can do that by going to chegg@TorahResource.com. Not going to, but emailing chegg@TorahResource.com. It is chegg@TorahResource.com. You can also call our comment line, 253-465-3205. It's 253-465-3205. And we would actually, so we base our show around the comments and the questions and all that kind of stuff that we get. And because of that, if you have anything that you would like us to talk about, please shoot us an email or call our comment line or leave a comment in the comments section on YouTube. And that actually fuels this show. Next week, we have no clue what we're talking about because you guys haven't written us in a little while. So start writing those emails, start making those comments, and leaving those phone messages, and we would be happy to talk about those things. Okay, anything else before we take off?
No, great discussion today. Thanks for the emails from Ned and from who was the other?
Paul. We
Paul.
we had a couple of them today, so
Yeah.
good ones. Thank
Yeah,
you very
good.
much,
Thank you.
everybody. And we hope that this conversation has done at least one thing. You know what that is? It's to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. Why? Because Messiah matters.